Hello and welcome to an abbreviated recording from the March 2013 Technology Tuesdays presentation on MOOCs. Just a note, the views and opinions you may encounter here are strictly my own. They're not necessarily endorsed or sanctioned by the university. But if you want to get in contact with me, you can do so here. My telephone number, email address and web address are on the screen. So this month we spoke about MOOCs. So what exactly is a MOOC? Well, the word MOOC is an acronym, stands for Massive Open Online Course, and the name is somewhat similar to the MMORPG, the massively multiplayer online role-playing games like World of Warcraft you may have heard about or even played on the internet. In terms of a MOOC, massive here dictates the number of students who are participating in the course. And to give you an idea of how many students you may see in a MOOC, here are numbers from a MOOC I participated in last year. This was the Internet History, Technology and Security MOOC, which was ran out of Coursera. At the start, we had about 45,000 students signing up for the course, but you can see towards the end we have a significant volume of attrition. We have just over 5,000 students taking the final and a little bit under 5,000 students being awarded a certificate. But still, these are huge numbers, so hence the word massive. In terms of open, the courses are open to anyone with a computer and access to the internet, but sometimes the word open pertains to the content within the course. So some professors will make their content open and allow others to reuse or remix or repurpose that content as they see fit. Hopefully with attribution, but as a way to allow the knowledge to flow freely over the internet. In terms of online, these courses are available to anyone who has a computing device. And what we're seeing now is people are moving towards more mobile devices. So the beauty, the appeal of a MOOC sometimes is the fact that you can consume the content and interact on a mobile device. So that might be a smartphone, a tablet, or a laptop. And the last part of the acronym, the C, the course. Here there are some differences in design. Some people who design and teach MOOCs prefer to follow what's called a connectivist approach in terms of the design of the course. And this is analogous to somebody sending out an email with a digest of links for their students to look at. So here the course exists over the network of the internet. It doesn't have a constrained or contained location. It doesn't exist necessarily with a learning management system. It's basically a series of loosely linked resources. And those resources may be third party. There may be something that's not directly controlled by the professor. The other approach is more of the broadcast approach. And this sort of is more closely aligned with the way that we do online learning within the College of Business and DePaul in general, where we're using a learning management system, and within that we are embedding a series of resources and activities that students would interact with. There may be outside resources that the students encounter, but the bulk of the material, the bulk of the interaction is taking place within a secured system. You may want to sort of think about the connectivist approach as being more akin to the absent-minded professor. If you're somebody who teaches in a way where you are rapidly providing resources to your students, where you are able to sort of think in such a way where you can connect to a diverse set of resources very rapidly, the connective approach is very appealing, because it allows you to create content on the fly. It allows you to create a very sort of dynamic course. The broadcast course obviously is one that requires a little bit more advanced preparation. If you think about other aspects of the design of courses, pace is another consideration. So here on screen we have the names of two of the predominant MOOCs, Coursera and Udacity. And here we have a difference of design in terms of pace. Coursera generally sort of follows regular deadlines. When you start a course, you can expect to have assignments due on a particular date, sort of following a week-by-week schedule. Udacity allows students to go through content in a way that is self-paced. So with Coursera, it may be argued that there's more of a community in that students can connect and work with students who are moving through the material at the same pace. Udacity is perhaps less of a community model, but allows students to sort of follow a just-in-time learning schedule. It allows them to fit their learning into their sort of busy lifestyle in a way that perhaps you wouldn't with a regular deadline-designed course. If you want to look at examples of MOOCs, there are 4 suggestions I have for you. One of which is perhaps a resource that people may not think, strictly speaking, is a MOOC. About a year ago, Google started an online course that taught people how to search with Google. This was the Power Searching with Google site. This is a good example of effective design of a MOOC, well worth checking out. And then we have the companies that you will frequently see cited in sites like the Chronicle of Higher Education or the New York Times. So we have Udacity, Coursera, and edX. The thing that I find striking about many of these MOOCs is their growth was faculty-led. This I find particularly appealing because here we have courses, we have ideas being generated by faculty because that's the way they want to teach. MOOCs, from my perspective, are not something that the institution decided that they wanted to do. This was something that faculty who were challenged by the fact that they weren't reaching as many students as they wanted to, decided to work on. So on screen we have photographs for Andrew Ng and Daphne Koller. So these are prime examples of the faculty-led design and impetus of MOOCs. What they did to a certain degree was to bypass the traditional LMS vendors like Blackboard and Desire to Learn, although both of those platforms do have MOOCs on them. They did this for a couple of reasons. From my perspective, they did this because by creating their own systems, they could ensure that their MOOCs were free to students and open to all. The traditional learning management systems aren't really designed to deal with a large number of students. So I think this is another reason why they bypassed the traditional learning management systems. The MOOCs also require scalable assessment. If you think about the design of traditional online courses, assessment typically doesn't scale that well. Learning management systems have gradebooks that are designed to sort of show less than 100 students in a gradebook. We have many more students than that in a MOOC. The other reason why perhaps these folks bypass the traditional learning management systems is they might be looking to sell their software as part of their business model. And business models has been one of the criticisms of MOOCs at the moment. We don't really know how many of these companies will survive over the long term. We don't know if their business models really have viability. But some of the ideas that have been floated at the moment are the concept of selling student data, which I find a little bit worrying, or the concept of micropayments, where students will pay a small amount of money, but because we have thousands of students taking the class, we can actually have a business model that works. The other concept is selling books or merchandise, and we do see some professors who are teaching MOOCs are promoting quite heavily the books that they have written or participated in the creation of. The other concept is selling content to academia. So it could be that some of the traditional book publishers look to get into the MOOC model as a way that they can ensure that their revenue stream isn't disrupted too much. Charitable funding is another. So folks like the Hewitt Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation may be funding MOOCs. We've seen them, to a certain degree, fund the development of some courses. The question is whether they decide to fund over the long term. And then there's work placement. It could be that companies like Coursera or Udacity are able to place the students who do very well in their courses and receive income from doing so. In terms of the differences between MOOCs and what I call the traditional online learning models, the obvious differences are credit. So here at DePaul, we offer credit for our online courses. We haven't seen the majority of MOOCs offer that, although that is changing fairly rapidly now. This is an area where some nimble universities are trying to get in on the MOOC phenomenon. There's also the difference of open versus closed resources. On the whole, most MOOCs are open in that the resources are available for anyone to go in and have a look at. We don't see that typically with the traditional online classes. There's also the difference of faculty interaction. Obviously, a professor can interact differently with 40 students in an online class versus 40,000 students in an online class. And sometimes the interaction we're seeing is more akin to the laboratory model, where we may have a professor sort of presenting their material within an arena, within a large sort of stage, and then we have groups of students moving to laboratories after lecture. We also have different expectations of the student. We're seeing huge numbers of attrition, and many of the professors who are leading MOOCs expect that not all of their students will complete the course. That's obviously very different to the model we have here at DePaul, where we do not want students to drop out of our courses. We do not want students to fail our courses. And our expectations of the student are notably different. And then we have the issue of scalability. It's difficult to scale an artisanal designed online course. The MOOCs have to be designed for scalability. There's no way that they can work if things don't scale past a couple of thousand students. And then lastly, the difference is the type of student. Here at DePaul, we're very much mission driven. We have a mission in which we ensure that the students who come to the university, who take our courses, are assisted. We're looking to make sure that there's a personal sort of one-to-one model in place. The students who do well in MOOCs are very much self-directed students who don't necessarily need or want that assistance. So there's a difference in terms of the people who are taking those courses, perhaps. However, we can look to some best practices that we can follow from effective MOOC design. To begin with, we have core values. The core values of a university and a MOOC basically are to do two things. The first is certification. We're assessing learning. We're demonstrating that learning has taken place. And then secondarily, we're providing an environment in which learning takes place. And that's something that universities and MOOCs do, but they have to do it well. And to do it well, we have to design courses effectively. So how do we design effective MOOC courses? Well, my perspective on this is we start at the end. We follow the example of, say, a movie like Memento, where the first scene in the movie is the end of the movie. We see the sort of similar outcome in the movie Citizen Kane, where it's not until the end of the movie that we understand the significance of the first scene. So to design an effective course, we begin with certification. We work out what is it we're there to assist the student with. They want to have a certain ability. They need to have a certain knowledge. They need to be able to demonstrate something. So how are we going to certify that learning or ability is there? Well, we'll do that through assessment. So there has to be a process of testing that's designed that leads to certification. So if we're going to test something, we need to allow students to go through a process of experimentation, where there's interaction, where they make mistakes, and where we provide feedback. And that feedback may be autonomous, or it may be on a one-to-one level. And then the last part is providing instructional materials, the material that allows students to learn. The problem I typically see is most people start with creating instructional materials, and then the last thing they're thinking about is assessment and certification. So really the crucial thing here is to start at the end. Now, there are some possible outcomes to the growth of MOOCs. It's perhaps too early to tell what will happen, but some of the possible outcomes are destabilizing publishing. If you think about it, a MOOC is perhaps the best book you've ever encountered. It has the same content you may find in a book, but it also has videos, it has assessment, it has feedback, and it's perhaps free. So perhaps what we will see is some publishing houses being hit by the growth of MOOCs. It's possible that this will destabilize higher education. So if you can take a MOOC course for free, or perhaps sort of $6,000 or $7,000 versus the $40,000 through a traditional university, we may see some universities going out of business or looking for new income streams. We may see the growth of certificates. It could be that the market for MOOCs is less interested in a higher education, but what they're looking for are individual certificates, badges, or credits that demonstrate that they have particular proficiency in a certain area. We may see the industrialization of education, where as MOOCs or online courses become the predominant model of teaching, we're moving more towards a model of publishing where we see groups, teams of educators working in collaboration to create something and following more of an industrial model. This may change the role of adjuncts. So it could be that adjuncts are required in the co-teaching of MOOCs, or it could be that we see that the role of an adjunct is no longer required because we can deal with the increased demand for education by using MOOCs. Or we may see that people are using MOOCs to prepare themselves for traditional higher education. So students may do very well in university because they've taken various courses through a MOOC beforehand, which better prepares them for study. And then lastly, we may see the traditional learning management systems being destabilized. If a MOOC platform is better in some respects than the traditional LMS, and it's available for free or at reduced cost, perhaps we'll see universities moving to those systems. For the cynics, this is sort of déjà vu all over again. 10, 15 years ago, we had a great deal of interest in open courseware, and universities like MIT providing content for free for anyone in the world to use. There was a criticism at the time, and that criticism is still there, that the materials that were provided were little more than syllabi. But some people think that the MOOC sort of enthusiasm is very close to what was there for OpenCourseWare a couple of years ago. Some professors are seeing MOOCs as an opportunity to engage in big data. If you think about the number of students who are participating in a MOOC, this may be an opportunity to do some very interesting research to see how well students are learning from particular material, to see what their needs, their wants, their behavior is. One way that MOOCs may develop could be through adaptive learning models like ALEKS, which is assessment and learning in knowledge spaces. This, I think, is the way that some MOOCs may distinguish themselves over the long term. And this is how we could get certain sort of efficiencies in the design of MOOCs. Now, this concept pertains more towards sort of mathematics and sort of concepts that we can sort of test in a sort of binary level. It's probably not going to pertain so well to social science, but it's an interesting development. But as I said earlier, the fear from some educators is the future of teaching sort of moves into a more industrialized model where perhaps faculty have less of the one-to-one connection that they currently have with students. So some people are worried about the way that the future may trend. In terms of what DePaul could do, there are a couple of concepts that are available to the university. And again, I'm speaking from my own perspective here. I'm not speaking for the institution. DePaul could decide to award credit for students who have taken MOOCs and decide then to come to DePaul. We could decide to offer a MOOC. If we do that, my view on this is we need to offer a unique value proposition. There needs to be a way that the MOOCs that DePaul offers are MOOCs that couldn't be offered by competing universities. And there are a couple of ways in which we can do that. The first one is faculty. My perspective here is the online courses that we offer within the College of Business are courses in which students get to know their faculty and faculty get to know their students. There's a connection here. There's sort of a model in which professors know their students, know how to help them, and there's an efficient and effective communication model in place. Or the way that we could distinguish ourselves from the competition is through mission. So DePaul is obviously a Vincentian university, and because of that, we have a mission. There are certain things that the university is empowered to do. So perhaps the MOOC would follow sort of social outreach or Vincentian leadership. If we were to design a MOOC, my perspective is we would do best to design something that is of around 5 weeks in duration. Our typical courses here follow a 10 or 11-week model, and this can sometimes be a little bit too arduous for online students. So I think really what we want to do is design courses which are sprints rather than marathons. We'd also need to think about platform. We're using Desire to Learn here at the university, so the question is this the ideal platform to operate a MOOC on? Anyway, as I say, that was an abbreviated presentation on MOOCs as part of Technology Tuesdays. If you want to get in contact with me, you can do so through the various channels here. Thank you for listening.